Welcome back to Two Converts. I'm Rusty, and my good friend over there is.
Jason,
Now, both Jason and I joined the church when we were in high school, and we've never looked back. We love living the gospel, learning the gospel, and sharing the gospel, which is why we do this channel. So, if you were looking for undermining or skeptical content about the church, you're welcome to go elsewhere because that is not how we roll. We are all in, and we have two objectives with this channel. We want to help those of you who are investigating the church hear about some of these topics and doctrines from people who join the church from the outside in. My background is a blend of atheism and Presbyterianism, and Jason's background is a nice, devout Jewish background. And you can learn more about our conversion stories in the description below. We have links to that. And here's how you can help us subscribe. It's a big deal. The more subscribers the channel has, the more that it's shown to other people to find out about it and hopefully help build the Lord's kingdom in any way possible. Now, we don't think we're all that special, but maybe something that we say is done in a way that resonates with people, right? Who have come from that way. And that leads me to the next point is you guys, when you put your comments below, when you put your insights down there, that could be that piece that somebody needs to help complete somebody's conversion or at least get them on the process there. Complete the conversion probably isn't the right way to say that because it's a process that's ongoing. Anyway, Jason, you and I earlier were guests on Greg Matson's channel, and we're a little tired out from that. So we're going to try to keep this a little bit shorter. We're going to do section 2 of the Doctrine and Covenants. Is there anything you want to add to the intro?
no, I just want to obviously endorse Greg Matson show on Quick, CWIC, Quick Online. Check out Greg's stuff. He's got a huge channel, like almost 50,000 followers, and Greg is faithful and gives a really interesting perspective on approaching the covenant path in the 21st century. A real disciple. He goes off on a lot of different topics too, and even gets more in the realm of political and cultural and media issues. So highly recommend Greg to you.
Got it. And that's actually the thing that we covered with him earlier was a little bit of a rebuttal for all of this anti-LDS, anti-Mormon, I guess you call it content or entertainment that's coming out.
Yeah.
Whatever you call it, and some of the things even that have crept into BYU. So that's what we were kind of addressing was defending the saints for the settling of the West and for our continued pioneering as we spread the gospel and the culture of the church around this globe. Okay, we're going to move into section 2 now. And what's really interesting here is this is an excerpt pulled from Joseph Smith history, and what was going on is he mentioned that when Moroni appeared to him, I have a depiction of that behind me. When Moroni appeared to him that night, when he was praying for basically to find out the state of his soul, Moroni quoted those popular verses from Malachi, very dear to the hearts of our Jewish brethren, of the return of Elijah.
Yeah.
But it varied in some things. And so, what we thought would be an interesting thing to do today is just to look at those variances and maybe discuss a little bit about why they were meaningful and why were they included, why they were included. So, I'm going to read the first little bit, and this would correspond with Malachi chapter 4, 5 through 6 in the King James version of the Bible, King James version of the Bible, which is what Joseph Smith would have. And then we're going to look at how it was recorded or how it was presented to Joseph Smith by Moroni. All right, so here's how it reads in the KJV. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet. That's how it stands in the KJV. In the Joseph Smith presentation, it says, Behold, I will reveal unto you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet. Now, if you're an investigator, you've probably heard us talk about priesthood before in probably different ways than you're used to hearing. And we make a big deal about it, especially when we talk about authority, right? And this chain of command as far as that goes. So, Jason, I wanted to tee you up for this because I think that we can learn a lot from Jewish tradition on how they kind of view the priesthood. So here's a
Yeah.
question is why do we make such a big deal about priesthood? Because that was one of the things that Moroni altered about this presentation of these verses to Joseph Smith.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, it's Doctrine and Covenant section 2 is really exciting. We got, I mean, I'm always wanting to look at this in the historical context. So this is given um, Joseph Smith's history relating to the words of the angel Moroni when Joseph Smith was at the house of his father in Manchester, New York in 1823. Okay. So, and so Moroni is giving a prophecy to Joseph Smith. And we got to recognize Joseph Smith probably doesn't even understand what Moroni's talking about. Um, and it is revealing unto you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet. Okay. But what's so cool about the Doctrine and Covenants, what I love about it, is you see the fulfillment. Um, Unfortunately, the Doctrine and Covenants is just written in the way of just revelations. There's no narrative, which is why I actually really love Saints, the new history of the church, because Saints is it's more like the other scriptures that we have, where they're sewing and weaving the revelations into the narrative, into the story. But we're giving you the story here. So remember 1823, Moroni talks about revealing the priesthood through Elijah the prophet. It's April 3rd, 1836, which is actually in 1836 is Passover. This is if you go back and you could do
Oh
historical
yeah.
calendar.
Yep.
Passover is always in the spring, and so in Jewish tradition there is an empty seat, an empty chair. Nobody's allowed to sit in it. It's saved for Elijah the prophet to come before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, because in Jewish tradition, Moses is that historical prophet of the redemption, a redeemer with a lowercase r, who delivers the people of Israel out of Egypt, out of bondage, into the wilderness, and then into the promised land. But Passover, as the Jewish people celebrate Passover after that, they're also looking to the future. And Elijah is supposed to be like a second Moses who's coming to redeem the people before the great and dreadful day, which is the final redemption. And so it's there there's an empty seat, so to speak, in the Kirtland, Ohio temple on April 3rd, 1836. Joseph Smith says in the afternoon, I assisted the other presidents in distributing the Lord's Supper, which is a symbol of the Passover Seder, to the church, receiving it from the 12, whose privilege it was to officiate at the sacred desk this day. After having performed this service to my brethren, I retired to the pulpit, the veils being dropped, and bowed myself with Oliver Cowdery in solemn and silent prayer. After rising from prayer, the following vision was opened to both of us. And this is the Passover where Elijah actually comes to redeem all the tribes of Israel again, uh, and a great latter day redemption, a
But
great
but
latter
wait a
day
minute, Jason.
exodus.
I thought he was supposed to go to the Jews.
Well, he did. He is going to the Jews through the prophet Joseph Smith, who, and we could get into all of that theology. I mean, if you want to get it direct, guess who else visits here is Moses.
Mm-hmm.
Moses comes. It says, Moses appeared before us and committed unto us the keys of the gathering of Israel from the four parts of the earth, and the leading of the 10 tribes from the land of the north. So, how does Joseph Smith use those keys for the Jews? Well, he dispatches Orson Hyde to Jerusalem, to the Mount of Olives. Orson Hyde uses those keys of Moses to dedicate the land of Israel and Jerusalem for the gathering of the Jewish people for the final redemption. That happens in 1841, which is 5 years after this. But we're still focused on Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much here, right? But Elijah comes Uh, he was taken to heaven without tasting death. He's got these powers between life and death. And it says, Malachi said that Elijah should be sent before the great and dreadful day of the Lord come to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers, lest the whole earth be smitten with a curse. And then the Lord says to Joseph Smith, therefore, the keys of this dispensation are committed into your hands, Joseph Smith's hands. And by this ye may know that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is near, even at the doors. So it's Elijah is the future oriented Moses, right? The Moses, the redeemer of the future Exodus. And the keys have been delivered. We could talk about what I think of as vertical redemption and kind of like horizontal redemption. And as you can surmise, perhaps with Elijah, we're talking about vertical because we're talking about your family tree, the roots going back to your ancestors, to the fathers, and then also the branches going vertically kind of downward to the children and sealing up the generations of the house of Israel, right? And that's what I mean. That's the central idea of the covenant of the Abrahamic covenant.
Now, I'll take a moment then to emphasize this idea of why authority is necessary, right? It was interesting that
Yeah,
Moses, and I'm glad you called that out about passing on these keys of the gathering, and then Elijah is passing on the keys of sealing, right, to make this possible. But I think it's really rough for a lot of people that come from an evangelical or Protestant background where not as much emphasis is placed on the authority because a lot of authority more or less from them is like, well, it's my interpretation of the Bible, that's my authority, right? And
yeah.
kind of state it like that. Well, I
I
went to
studied Hebrew and Greek,
I
so
went
I
to a yes, I went to a theological school, right, which is just people's interpretation of them and them kind of familiarizing with them, and now I have authority. That's clearly not how it works. And if you ask, well, why is this authority such a big deal, right? It's just the words that matter, all that kind of stuff. Listen, Jason said it. I'm glad he did. He very clearly said before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, right? And
yeah,
what that means is the second coming and the tribulations that are coming. That was a big reason for the timing of the restoration of the gospel. Now, if you're trying to scale an organization quickly, and you're essentially dealing with life and death, right? As far as people's eternal salvation or damnation here, it has to be done the right way by the right people in the under the right authority. I mean, imagine the military trying to operate without a clear chain of command or authority to make decisions. I mean, you're talking about
yeah,
people running around with very powerful weapons that are just flying loosey-goosey. Well, I read this manual and this is how I interpret it for me for how we're doing war, right? That's not going to work very well. So it's the same thing as if you truly believe that we're in a fight between good and evil and that the time is running short and we need to massively scale an organization quickly, it has to be done with the right chain of command and with the
yeah.
right authority here to do it. And so that's very important to point out. So if you ask, well, why is priesthood authority so important? Hopefully that made a little bit more sense to you. Okay, let's
Yeah.
move on, let's move on here. So this great dreadful day of the Lord we're talking about, and again that coincides with what the Lord told to Joseph Smith. All right, verse 6, and he shall, we're talking about Elijah, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to the fathers. Okay, so now listen to how Moroni delivered it to him. And he shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises. That's all new. The hearts of the children, the promises made to the fathers, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers. Now, Jason, I really like to go off on this because it again tees up the importance of this Abrahamic covenant, right? That ties, old Israel to the new. So, Jason, what is the power of these promises that were placed in the hearts of the children?
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating that Moroni talks about planting in the hearts of the children. And because worldwide, what we see after these great revelations and keys are given to the prophet Joseph Smith, we see the beginning of interest in genealogy. where uh, human beings from across the world start becoming interested in their pedigree and where they come from and who their ancestors are. Some just are for curiosity's sake, but the spirit of Elijah is starting to open on the face of the earth, and some civilizations or countries, nations kept genealogical records than others. It depends. The Jewish people were one of the best, right? Because you gotta know if you're a Levite or
Mhm.
a Kohen, a priest, or a descendant of King David, right? If the Messiah hasn't come yet, well, you gotta know what your pedigree is and your lineage, or how are we going to know who's the priest and who the kings are, right?
Mhm.
Um, but also just the connection, the bond to Abraham that you if you know you're of the people and the progeny of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you want to be able to know that for sure. Uh, and so these keys are unlocked, and so people want to start going back in their generations, and that's the work that we're doing in the temples of the Lord with our proxy ordinances, baptisms for the dead, washings and anointings, endowments, and sealings. And all these sets of ordinances are, especially the capstone, the sealing, is to bind the children to their fathers and mothers and all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, rolling back to Adam and Eve, so that as we learn in the endowment, right, that Adam and Eve uh, are the mother and the father of this world, and Adam holds the keys of all the dispensations. So you wanna lock yourself in, seal yourself in
Mhm.
to the covenant chain. You don't want to be that broken link.
That's what I was going to ask you, Jason, as kind of a follow-up, is this idea why? Because this is something that I truly think so many people don't appreciate enough about the Jews, even in their current form. It's how long this unbroken chain of at least tradition, right? Because we know there's obviously always varying degrees of orthodoxy or adherence to these rules, but at least maintaining the tradition.
Yeah.
Why is that idea of being in a covenant with God so strong that it's lasted 3,000 years of generations, even without for so long a clear prophet and Messiah that were promised along? How is that possible that these promises are so strong that it's kept that tradition alive through all these generations?
Yeah, I mean, in the Jewish tradition, it all goes down to all 12 tribes of the nation presenting themselves before the Lord at Mount Sinai, and all of them being offered the covenant by the Lord, and they say, we will obey and we will listen. We will do and we will obey. All assenting to the covenant. So it's like a massive covenant. It's like if you had an open air temple and you just had all the members of the church come and 17 million people, right? And that everybody's doing temple covenants on a mountain. That's what Mount Sinai was. So and they're making the covenant on behalf of all the future generations.
Right.
Yeah, I can share with you a real quick scripture. We wrote about this in the Burning Book too. It's we have a chapter called "Neither with You Only." I can show you this. Okay, so it says this is Deuteronomy 29, uh, and this is where Moses is renewing the covenant with the people, all the tribes. So he says, "Ye stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your captains of your tribes, your elders, and your officers, with all the men of Israel." So that all 12 tribes are there. It's a 12 tribe collective covenant. That thou shouldest enter into covenant with the Lord thy God, and into his oath, which the Lord thy God maketh with thee this day, that he may establish thee today for a people unto himself, and that he may be a God unto thee, he may be unto thee a God, as he has said unto thee, as he has sworn unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. Neither with you only do I make this covenant and oath, but with him that standeth here with us this day before the Lord our God, and also with him that is not here with us this day. So there's this idea that the 12 tribes make the covenant, but they're making it also on behalf of all of their posterity that will come after them.
Hmm.
And so in Jewish tradition, whether you have a prophet or you don't have a prophet, doesn't matter. Your fathers and mothers were at Mount Sinai. They made the covenant. You are in covenant. You are obligated to pass that covenant to your children. Otherwise, you are failing the Lord.
Yeah. And I guess with each successive generation, that peer pressure, if you will, just grows stronger and stronger. Like, I don't want to be the one that breaks 3,000 years of tradition,
Right.
kind of builds up like
Exactly.
that. Okay.
Which is a concept we need in our church, right?
Yes.
If we could look at our children and say it's why are we teaching our children the restored gospel, right?
Mhm.
Because we are desperate to pass the covenant to our children. We're not people are like, why don't you just let your kids choose? Well, no, I have a covenant that I want to pass to my children. I want them to be in a covenant with God, so I'm going to teach them the covenant path. I'm not going to just let them explore whatever they want.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, that idea of letting them choose. Yeah, ultimately they will have to choose,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, the world doesn't necessarily promote all of the accurate information for them to make a good choice, right?
Yep.
It's really the family's responsibility to present the truth and help them discern between truth and error. There's language there for you. Then they can actually make, because at that point, when they've at least adequately learned the details around it, been presented to it, have had the chance to be old enough to see and discern between those two, then if they make the choice to go off, that's on them. But if
Yep.
we don't bring them to that point, then we're accountable, right?
Yep. You got
So,
it.
all right, so let's wrap this up. So after he says, planting in the hearts of the children promises, then he says, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. Now that's how it's currently found in the KJV. But in this Moroni special, he says, if it were not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. So if the promises were not planted in the hearts of the children, and there was this turning toward each other, if that didn't happen, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. Now, depending how you read it, that can drastically change the meaning between those two things. Now, we already know that the Lord is going to come to burn the wicked with the second coming. But interesting, this utterly wasted. Is he implying there that the purpose of it would be, wasted, that it wouldn't have reached its actual purpose in creation? So the question, Jason, why is this relationship between father and children and this covenantal relationship we're talking about so important to the Lord? We talked about why it's so important, with the people, right? But why is it so important to the Lord?
Yeah. The Lord is wanting to build a people, as we just saw in Deuteronomy 29. And this is interesting. And I'll get to it quickly. So if you go to the footnotes here, it takes you to Luke 1:17. This is a New Testament concept and a biblical concept. And the Savior says, "And he shall go before him in the spirit and power of Elias or Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Okay, so follow this with me here. One of the most interesting things that the rabbis taught us about the difference between Noah and Abraham, right? Okay, what's these are both prophets,
Mhm.
patriarchs, righteous men. The rabbis say that Abraham was greater than Noah. Why? Because Noah comes out from the flood, which is, well, okay, first of all, it is a wasting of the earth, right? The whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. So the problem with Noah is the earth was wasted, but then he doesn't he kind of fails to pass the covenant on. There's a sense that there no, Enoch picks up something, and it's all just kind of, we're not knocking Noah, but he doesn't build that covenant people like Abraham does. So the rabbis say why Abraham is greater and why he's more blessed is because he builds a covenant family. He passes the covenant successfully to Isaac and onward, but he also is a missionary. And the rabbis say, well, actually, Abraham tried to save other people, and whereas Noah just saved himself and his own family, and Abraham was like reaching out and trying to horizontally, right, save his neighbors and bring them into the covenant. And we know Abraham did that even when he got to the land of Israel. Um, but I think this is so interesting that part of this spirit of Elijah is turning the disobedient to the wisdom of the just. So not only are we turning our hearts to our fathers, really Abraham is the key guy because he's the one that is like the centerpiece, the center of gravity, as we would say in the military. It's Abraham. But also, as we turn our hearts to the prophets of the past, the wisdom of the just, we're not just turning genealogically. We're also turning to the wisdom of the ancient prophets and wanting to bind ourselves to these patriarchs.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to maybe talk on this because I know that there's so many out there that have, oh goodness, almost every family I can think of has been impacted by some family member leaving the church and it being very tragic, right? Very hard for
Yeah,
the family to cope with. Now, that's part of being in the last days. We're talking about these prophecies. Matthew 24:24 talks about the very elect being deceived in the last days. We knew these things would be happening, but I love that you brought up this example of Abraham because, well, let me jump down actually to his grandson if we're going to talk about Jacob slash Israel.
yeah,
It's this having a lot of children that you spend a lot of time and effort and prayer and fasting over to keep them in and to train them in the right way, to do everything you possibly can to equip them with what they need to face the world and stand strong and stay in the covenant, right? And
yeah,
that's a big, big part, and that's really tough. And I think that's a reason a few years ago that President Nelson was using the term intentional parenting. And
mm.
again, if you're investigating the church from the outside, you may know already that, members of the church often have big families and they're often, tight knit and those kind of things, which is great. Ideally, it's all of them, but there are these exceptions. But man, it's for those of you that are already converts and those of you that are coming in, really take the time to be intentional in all that you do with your children to teach them these things. And I will say this, that's something I admire so much about Jewish tradition is how much emphasis and repetition and teaching is involved in this covenant to keep them in. I mean, all these seders every single week, all this symbolism and this kind of pageantry going through this. And I mean, that is embedded in their minds. And I think we would do well to imitate that in some ways. So
Yeah.
anyway, we're going to go ahead, Jason, we're going to wrap this up. Any final thoughts you need to part with?
No, I appreciate that. I think we have a lot to learn from the Jewish people and vice versa, and Joseph and Judah. And the Jewish people have successfully passed covenant on for 3,000 years without prophets even. So it's like, they're what are they doing that to pass the covenant to each generation? And we should take that more seriously as Latter-day Saints if we truly are a covenant people of the Lord.
Well said. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for joining us again. We love you. Thanks for joining. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, share it with your friends, all of that good stuff. Until next time, please remember to stay immersed in the scriptures and deepen your conversion. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.